Morning power up call. This has taken quite a bit to get up and started, but we are here. We are alive. We have students on the call and we are good to go. Today's gonna be a fun topic. This particular idea came up in a Q&A I ran last night in the real world. Did a quick Q&A, text-based Q&A, and someone asked a question about note-taking. And it got me thinking about a different way that I approach note-taking than most people. And I think it's something that's very valuable or could be very, very valuable for a lot of you guys who are going through the boot camp, or those of you who are looking to learn new skills and develop new competencies. The method I'm about to describe to you is one of the best ways to improve the quality of your learning. It's funny, right? Like a normal school, like when you grow up, they don't really teach you how to learn. They just fill your mind with information. They teach you how to answer quizzes and answer tests, but they don't actually teach you how to learn. They don't teach you how to direct your learning. I've always been a self-directed learner. Ever since I could read, I have basically been the one who's been in charge of my own education. And I encourage all of you to do that. Take the same level of control in your own life. I encourage each and every one of you to take complete and utter responsibility for what you learn. And the technique I'm going to teach you today is something that can help you learn faster, can help you remember things that you learn. It's something that I've been very good at since a young age. But I realized that I do notes differently than most people when I was having this conversation with a student yesterday. Let me check real quick, make sure the audio is working. Yeah, it looks like the audio is working. We're good to go. So let me explain it. Most people, when they take notes, they do it one of two ways. They either have a piece of paper open or they have their phone or computer open. And as things are being said, they write them down, right? So the professor or someone speaking will say something that's interesting and they'll hurry and write that down, or they'll type it into their computer or something like that, right? The problem with this is it doesn't really teach you how to remember things. It doesn't train your brain to remember things. It trains your brain to not remember things. It trains your brain to ignore information and just write it down. But what you really want to have happen is you want to train your brain to absorb information and keep that information inside of the brain to learn to retain it. And here is how I've always done this. And here is how I have learned I've trained my brain to remember almost everything that I hear. If something's useful, my brain knows how to remember it. It's amazing, right? Like I've always been blessed with this because of the specific approach to note taking that I've taken. And here's how it works. So instead of writing things down as you learn, instead of writing things down in the middle of a presentation or in the middle of reading a particular page inside of a book or something like that. Instead, wait until you get to the end of the video and then write down a summary of the key principles of what you learned plus how you can apply them, right? I usually do these on index cards or in a notebook. It doesn't really matter. You can do them it doesn't matter where you do them. You can do them inside of your note app. You can do it on your computer. It doesn't really matter. But the key thing here is to wait until the very end, until after you've consumed the information, and then write down a summary, right? What this does is it forces your brain to start remembering things. Right now, instead of having to remember something, you just write it down, right? Which means that your brain doesn't store it. It just says, oh, it's in this piece of paper. But if you force yourself to summarize what you've just learned, your brain will start realizing that it has to remember the information that's being presented, and it'll start storing it. So then you can then write it down. The first couple of times you do this, like you'll watch one of my videos and you'll get to the end and you're like, all right, and you'll sit down and write the summary and you'll discover that you can't. You're like, oh, I don't remember exactly what he said. And you have to rewatch the video. And then at the end, you'll be able to write the summary down because your brain is having to flip. It's having to switch from not memorizing something to then memorizing, to then storing it inside of your brain. But after a while, your brain will get to the habit of knowing that, hey, when I'm learning new information, I will be required by my driver, me, the person running my brain. I'll be required by him to write a summary of this and talk about how I can apply it. So it will start actively storing and actively interpreting that information significantly better. It's a shift, right? So instead of taking notes as you consume stuff, take notes at the end of a module, at the end of a video, at the end of a page, at the end of a chapter. Write down a summary of what you learned, what the key principles are, and how you're going to apply it. And that will force your brain the next time you go through to learn something to start storing it. When you can start remember everything you've ever learned, you start to have a superpower over other people. Most people, they learn things and it goes in one ear and out the other, as the saying goes. They learn something and they forget it immediately, which makes it really difficult when it's time to sit down and apply that knowledge. If you develop the ability to remember and store the information, the key ideas, the key principles inside of your brain the first time you learn it, then when you sit down to actually do your work, when you sit down on that sales call, when you sit down to write those emails or that landing page or those Facebook ads or whatever it is, you'll have that information and you can actually use that information. And sure, there'll be limitations and you have to go back and relearn a few things. You have to go back and freshen up and ask because you'll have new questions to approach the material with. But if you use this method, you'll start learning things in a way that that allows you to remember them and remember them immediately and remember them through the lens of application. So that key part of this note-taking process is not only do you summarize the key points, the key principles, but you write out how you are going to apply them in your life. What that does is it trains your brain to where when it's given new information, it immediately starts thinking about how it can apply it for profit in its life. If you develop that reaction, that habit inside of your own mind, you're going to start finding new opportunities, not only within copywriting to get better, but you'll find new opportunities to apply other new things that you're learning to profit from them as well. Whether that's in your health, your fitness, your relationships, your wealth, no matter what it is, if you train your brain to start looking for ways to use information to then apply and profit from them in your own life, you will start to see an increased number of opportunities beyond just remembering everything. You'll find new opportunities that you can now take advantage of. So as you guys are going through the program, as you guys are learning new things, as you guys are approaching, taking control of your learning, try out this method of taking notes. Try out taking notes after you've consumed it. Try training your brain to start remembering things so that you can have that information in your brain. So when you sit down to do the work, you'll have all of the resources in your brain you need to be successful. So that's the key insight for today. That's the call. You guys are going to go back and take a look at this. Looks like you guys have had a pretty good discussion here in the chats. I am going to move directly from this call to another Q&A inside of the real world. If you haven't made your way over to the real world, actually, yeah, there will be, I'm going to do a Q&A either right now or within about 5 minutes from this call to help people as they're getting onto the real world. We've got some questions people have. We're going to get things taken care of. But this has been a good morning power-up call late in the afternoon. It's Thanksgiving. It's a day with the family. It's a day to remember and be thankful for the things we have. Being thankful and grateful is one of the fastest ways you can start escaping the matrix. I conquered the French and stole their water. But it's been a good call, and I will talk with you guys again tomorrow.